On Monday morning, I was standing in the security pod with my tablet against my chest, waiting for someone to finish laughing. The room smelled like burnt coffee and warm plastic from too many monitors running at once. Glass walls. Low air conditioning. 6 people inside pretending they were too busy to look at me directly. Then Caleb, the team lead, leaned back in his chair and said, "Mara, you work in brand now. Leave the security calls to people who actually understand them." A couple of them smiled at that. One of them looked down at his desk. I did not say anything right away. I just stood there, holding my tablet, feeling that quiet kind of embarrassment that starts in your face and moves down your neck. What stayed with me later was not even the comment. It was the text message I got the next day from a number I did not know. "You should have left it alone." At the time, though, I had no way of knowing any of that. I only knew I had walked into the wrong room with the right information. I had been at North Shore Data Solutions for a little under 7 months. The company sold customer management software to regional banks, medical offices, and insurance groups. My job title sat under the marketing department, which made people assume I spent my days picking colors for email banners and adjusting headlines for product pages. Some days, that was true. Before that, though, I had spent 5 years in network security at a financial firm in St. Louis. Vulnerability research. Internal audits. Quiet work, mostly. The kind where the most important things happened in logs, not meetings. I left because my body forced the decision for me. Too many late nights. Too many incident reviews. Too much pressure attached to very small mistakes. After I had a panic episode in a board presentation, my doctor told me, in a tone that was gentler than the words themselves, that I could change the pace of my life or wait for it to change me. So I moved into marketing. It sounded softer from the outside. In some ways, it was. My office sat near the west side windows, just past the customer success bullpen. In the afternoon, the light came in pale and flat across the carpet tiles. You could hear phones ringing 2 departments over, printers starting up, the break room microwave opening and closing. It was ordinary in a way I had come to value. The portal issue started because I was recording a demo. We were preparing launch materials for an updated customer login flow, and I needed screen captures for a product video. I ran the 2-factor process several times that Thursday evening after most people had gone home. On the replay, I noticed a hesitation in the verification step. Not long. Just enough for something in me to go still. There are pauses in software that mean nothing. And there are pauses that mean the wrong thing is happening very fast. I stayed late and checked what I could from the front end. Then I went home, made tea I did not drink, opened my laptop again, and reviewed the traffic behavior from the public side. By midnight, I was fairly certain what I was seeing. During one brief stage of the authentication handshake, the system appeared to be sending sensitive account data before encryption fully completed. Not for long. Long enough. The next morning, I documented everything carefully. Screen captures. Timestamps. A plain language summary. Then I took it to the security team because that was the correct process, and for one short moment, I assumed the process would work. It did not. Caleb did not even take the tablet from my hand. He turned halfway toward me, one elbow on the chair arm, and asked whether I had decided to get technical now that marketing had finished rewriting the homepage copy. A man named Owen laughed before I answered. I explained the verification sequence as clearly as I could. I mentioned packet exposure, timing, and the authentication window. Caleb looked at my blouse, then at my tablet, then back at me with that patient expression people use when they have already decided not to listen. "This is what happens," he said, "when someone takes 2 online courses and thinks they can interrupt real work." That got more laughter. I remember the hum of one of the ceiling lights. I remember somebody tapping a pen against a desk. I remember the woman on the team, Erin, keeping her eyes on her monitor even though I could tell she had heard every word. I said, as evenly as I could, if I'm right, customer records could be exposed. Owen raised his voice in a mocking version of mine and said, "could be exposed." Caleb stood then and came close enough that I could smell his cologne, something sharp and expensive. "Stay in your lane," he said quietly. "You'll have a much easier time here." So I left. I walked back through the office without hurrying. sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, closed it, then opened it again. For about 10 minutes, I did nothing except replay the conversation and look at my own reflection in the dark corner of the screen. After that, I made a decision. I was not going to argue with them again. I was going to watch. I built a small passive monitoring script that tracked unusual traffic patterns against the public-facing gateway. Nothing invasive. Nothing that touched private systems. Just enough to tell me whether someone else had noticed what I had noticed. I let it run through the weekend. By Sunday night, there were a few odd probes. By early Monday, there were more. When I got to the office, everything looked normal. Customer success reps were carrying paper cups back from the kitchen. Someone near reception was laughing about traffic on the interstate. The security pod was bright behind its glass walls, and Caleb's team looked relaxed. I sat down, logged in, and checked the monitor. At 9:41, the first real spike hit. Then I waited. At first, the spike looked like noise. A few scattered requests touching the same verification endpoint. Nothing aggressive. Nothing that would alarm someone who was only watching the main dashboards. But the pattern felt familiar to me. It was the way the requests arrived. Too even. Too careful. Like someone tapping lightly on a door before deciding whether to push it open. I leaned back in my chair and let the monitor window sit in the corner of my screen while the rest of the office carried on around me. Phones were ringing in customer support. Someone down the hall rolled a chair across the floor. The smell of toasted bread drifted from the break room. It was a very normal morning. At 9:52, the pattern changed. The requests were no longer probing. They were capturing. My script began marking packets at a rate that made my stomach tighten. Each one was tied to that brief authentication moment I had tried to explain on Friday. I watched it for almost 2 full minutes without moving. Then I saved the logs. I exported everything to an external drive, labeled the folder with the exact timestamp, and placed the drive in the inside pocket of my bag. Years in security had taught me that evidence sometimes mattered more than speed. At 10:03, the customer service floor became loud. Not gradually. All at once. Headsets lifted. Chairs rolled quickly. I heard someone say the words account access twice in less than 10 seconds. Another voice said unauthorized change. Then a supervisor hurried past my office door with a notebook in one hand and a phone in the other. I opened the monitoring window again. The traffic had multiplied. Whoever had found the vulnerability now understood exactly what it could do. That was when Liam appeared. He did not knock. He stepped into my office quickly, breathing harder than usual, tie pulled slightly loose. "You warned them," he said. It was not a question. I nodded once and turned my laptop toward him. The screen showed the live capture log, lines of traffic timestamps, repeated authentication calls, a cluster of packet signatures that should never have existed outside encrypted channels. Liam leaned closer. "How long?" he asked. "Active exploitation started about 15 minutes ago," I said. "But the probes began sometime yesterday." He ran a hand across his forehead and sat down across from me. "They told me you had a theory," he said quietly. "I gave them documentation," I replied. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply watched the traffic scroll. "Explain it to me," he said finally. So I did. I kept it simple, the way I had learned to speak during executive briefings years earlier. No jargon unless necessary, just sequence and impact. During authentication, the portal briefly assembled customer information before the encryption layer completed its cycle. Under normal conditions, the timing window was too short to notice. But if someone intercepted traffic during that exact moment, the packets could be captured before protection engaged. Name, address, account data, everything required to impersonate a customer. Liam listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back slowly in the chair. "How many records?" he asked. I glanced at the capture estimate running in the corner. Probably over 10,000 already. He exhaled through his nose. Jesus. The office outside had grown louder. Customer service managers were moving quickly between desks now, whispering instructions. Someone knocked on my door, opened it halfway, saw Liam inside, and quietly closed it again. "What do we do?" he asked. We patched the verification handshake immediately, I said. Then we shut down the authentication service temporarily to stop the capture window. And the attackers? They already have what they have. He stared at the screen again. Then he stood. Emergency meeting, he said. 30 minutes. He walked halfway to the door, then stopped. Mara. I looked up. Why didn't you come to me on Friday? I thought about the security pod. The laughter. Caleb's voice telling me to stay in my lane. I followed the process, I said. He nodded slowly, as if that answer explained more than either of us wanted to say out loud. When he left, I checked the monitoring script again. The capture rate had increased. Someone out there understood exactly how valuable those few seconds were. I exported another log. Then I waited. The executive meeting was held in the large conference room on the 10th floor, the one with the long walnut table and the city view nobody seemed to notice unless something was already going wrong. By the time I walked in, most of the chairs were filled. Liam stood near the screen at the front of the room, one hand on the back of a chair. Our CEO, Russell, was there. So was Sandra from legal, a few department heads, and Caleb with 2 people from his team. He did not look at me when I entered. He adjusted his watch, opened a notebook, and kept his attention fixed on the table as if this were a routine budgeting meeting. I took a seat near the end. The room smelled faintly of coffee and dry erase marker. Someone had set a glass pitcher of water near the middle of the table untouched. Outside the windows, traffic moved in slow silver lines under a gray sky. Russell was the first to speak. Tell me exactly what is happening, he said. Liam nodded toward me. Mara identified the vulnerability before the breach, he said. She also captured live indicators this morning as the exploit started. That got the room's attention. Not all at once. You could feel it move. Chairs straightened. Eyes lifted. Caleb finally looked at me directly, and I saw something different in his expression now. Not respect. Not yet. Just calculation. I connected my laptop to the screen and brought up the packet logs, the timeline, and the screen captures I had prepared over the weekend. Then I walked them through the sequence in the same calm order I had used in my office. What the portal was doing. Where the authentication process broke. Why the encryption timing mattered. How the exposed packets could be harvested. No drama. No accusations. Just process. When I finished the technical side, I switched to the timeline. Friday, issue observed during marketing demo recording. Friday afternoon, concern reported to security. Sunday evening, public probes detected. Monday morning, active exploitation confirmed. Then I stopped talking. Silence in a room like that can do useful work if you let it. Russell leaned back slightly and looked toward Caleb. Did she report this on Friday? Caleb folded his hands once, then unfolded them. She stopped by with a general concern, he said. Nothing I would call actionable. I kept my eyes on the screen. Liam spoke before I did. She described the verification handshake specifically. Caleb turned toward him. That was not my understanding of the conversation. I clicked back to the document I had created Friday morning. It was time-stamped. The file name was plain and dull on purpose. Under that, a one-page summary explained the exact risk in ordinary language. I rotated the laptop slightly so the room could see it. I brought this with me, I said. I offered to leave it with the team. No one said anything for a second. Then Sandra from legal asked, did anyone on security review this document? Caleb's jaw tightened. She spoke to us in passing. We receive concerns all the time. I nodded once. That's true. The room shifted again, maybe because they expected me to sound defensive and I did not. I'm sure you do, I said. That's why I wrote it down. Russell pressed 2 fingers against his temple. How many records? Liam looked to me. Current estimate is between 12 and 15,000 compromised, I said. Possibly more once we reconcile the logs. Russell lowered his hand. And liability? Sandra answered that one. Potential notification costs, regulatory exposure, contractual exposure, customer claims. She did not finish the list. She did not need to. Caleb finally turned to me fully then. With respect, he said, and the phrase felt carefully chosen, you're presenting this as if you were running a formal security review. You are not. You are working from the marketing side. He said marketing the way some people say temporary. I closed the laptop halfway, just enough to break the blue glow from the screen. Correct, I said, which is why I reported it instead of touching internal systems. That landed harder than anything else I had said, because it defined the line. I had seen the problem. I had documented it. I had escalated it properly. And after that, the choices belonged to someone else. Sandra looked from me to Caleb. Did your team retain any record of her visit? Not that I'm aware of, Caleb said. Liam's face changed slightly at that. Not anger exactly, more like recognition. He was starting to understand that the problem was no longer just the exploit. It was the gap between what had been known and what had been acknowledged. Russell stood and walked slowly to the windows, then back to the table. Containment first, he said. Liam, I want the authentication process patched and external access controlled immediately. Sandra, start preservation protocol on all relevant communications. No deletions. No channel cleanups. No private side conversations. At that, Caleb's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, just enough for me to notice. Then Russell looked at me. Mara, from this moment forward, you work directly with Liam on incident review until we understand the full scope. I gave a small nod. Understood. The meeting broke apart in pieces after that. Chairs moved. Phones came out. People began talking in low, urgent voices. I disconnected my laptop and slipped the drive back into my bag. As I was closing it, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I read it once, put the phone face down, and zipped the bag shut. Then I waited. I did not answer the text. I slid the phone into my bag, took my laptop back to my office, and closed the door behind me. The noise from the customer support floor came through the wall in a softened blur. Voices. Chairs. One printer running somewhere without pause. On my desk, the afternoon light had gone flat and pale. That was the point where I stopped thinking about fairness. I started thinking about sequence. When something goes wrong inside a company, people often imagine the truth appears on its own if they just wait long enough. In my experience, it does not. It has to be preserved, organized, and put in the right hands before someone with more confidence than accuracy reshapes it into something easier to survive. So I made rules for myself. Step 1. Preserve everything I already had. Step 2. Create a clean timeline that could stand on its own. Step 3. Do nothing impulsive. I began with the logs. I copied the packet captures, timestamps, screenshots, and my Friday notes to 2 separate encrypted drives. One stayed in my bag. One went into the locked drawer in my desk. After that, I printed the 1-page summary I had originally taken to security and stapled the timestamp sheet behind it. Paper still matters when people start forgetting what they said. Then I opened a fresh document and built the timeline from scratch. Thursday evening. Issue noticed during portal demo recording. Thursday night, front-end review from public-facing side. Friday morning, written summary prepared. Friday afternoon, reported directly to security team. Sunday night, probing activity observed. Monday morning, exploitation confirmed. Monday afternoon, executive notification and preservation order. I kept the language neutral. No adjectives. No commentary. Just time event record. At 2:17, Liam called. Can you come upstairs? He asked. His voice was steady, but not relaxed. When I reached the smaller incident room outside legal, he was there with Sandra and a man from infrastructure named Neil, whom I had met only once. The room was colder than the rest of the floor, and someone had set a portable whiteboard beside the wall. A tray with untouched sandwiches sat on the counter. The bread had already started to curl at the edges. Sandra nodded toward a chair. We've started preserving email and chat records, she said. But there's a problem. Neil turned his laptop so I could see it. The main security team's Slack channel had been archived less than an hour earlier. A new one had already replaced it. No explanation. No formal notice. Just a clean switch in the middle of an active breach review. Sandra's face did not change, but her voice did. That preservation order was issued before the archive, she said. Can you recover it? I asked. Neil nodded once. Probably. But the timing is bad. Bad was one word for it. Another was deliberate. Liam stood near the whiteboard with his sleeves pushed up, looking more tired than he had that morning. Caleb says they archived the channel to keep the incident response clean. Sandra gave him a brief look. That explanation will be tested. No one said anything after that. Neil went back to his keyboard. Sandra stepped into the hall to take a call. Liam stayed where he was, one hand against the edge of the table. Then he said, quietly, "Were you telling me everything earlier?" I understood the question behind the question. "Yes," I said. "Everything relevant to the breach." He nodded, but did not seem finished. "And the messages?" I forwarded all of them. "You think they're connected to security?" "I think the sender knows internal information they should not know, and I think they want me quiet before the record settles." That answer seemed to land with him. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. For a moment, the room was almost still. Just the low hum of the portable vent and Neil typing from the far end of the table. "Caleb and I worked together before this company," Liam said. "He's arrogant." I knew that, but I didn't think he was careless. I folded my hands in my lap. "Those are not the same thing," I said. That was the first moment he looked directly tired rather than merely pressured. I asked him twice if anyone had raised this issue before today. And he said no. I let that sit. It was not my job to help him reconcile his loyalty. It was my job to stay precise. A light knock came at the door. It was Erin from the security team. She stood just inside the room, badge still clipped to her cardigan, one hand wrapped around a paper cup she was no longer drinking from. "I only have a minute," she said. Liam straightened slightly. "What is it?" Her eyes flicked briefly toward me, then back to him. "Troy records the morning stand-ups sometimes," she said. "He says it helps him remember action items. If there was any discussion after Mara left on Friday, there may be a recording." Neil stopped typing. "Stored where?" Sandra asked from the doorway, having returned in time to hear the last sentence. Erin hesitated. "I don't know. He uses personal tools for a lot of things. Notes, voice memos, cloud storage. Caleb's told him before to stop." Sandra took that in without visible reaction. "Thank you," she said. Erin nodded once, set the paper cup down on the counter without drinking from it, and left. After the door closed, nobody spoke for a few seconds. A stand-up recording would matter. Not because it would prove I was right. The logs had already done that. It would matter because it could prove they heard me and chose not to act. That changes a failure into a decision. Neil broke the silence first. If Troy used any connected company account to sync the file, I may be able to locate a trace. Sandra looked at Liam. "Do it." Liam nodded. I reached for my bag to leave, and my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. HR. "Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Don't come in unprepared." I showed the screen to Sandra without a word. She read it once and looked up. "Save everything," she said. "I already have." Then I put the phone face down and waited. I arrived early the next morning, not because I was anxious. By then, anxiety would not have helped me much. I arrived early because I wanted 10 quiet minutes at my desk before anyone tried to define the day for me. The office was dim when I came in. Only half the overhead lights were on. A janitor's cart stood near reception, and the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. Through the windows, the parking lot looked silver blue under a low morning sky. I put my bag down, turned on my desk lamp, and reviewed the timeline one more time. Then I checked the 2 drives. Then I waited. At 8:31, Sandra called. "Come to boardroom C at 9, she said. "Bring your notes. Don't bring opinions." I wasn't planning to. "I know," she said, and hung up. Boardroom C was smaller than the main conference room, more private, no city view, just frosted glass and a long table with built-in power ports. When I stepped inside at 8:58, Russell was already there. Liam sat to his right. Helen from HR had a legal pad open in front of her. Caleb sat across from the empty chair waiting for me, one wrist resting lightly on the table as if this were a normal review meeting and not an attempt to settle the shape of a crisis. I took my seat, set my notebook down, and folded my hands. Helen began. "Mara, Concerns have been raised regarding your conduct during the breach response and the way you represented prior communications with the security team. Her tone was even, administrative, almost gentle. What concerns specifically? I asked. She glanced at her notes. That you may have overstated the precision of your original warning. Also, that your independent monitoring activity suggests an unusual degree of prior knowledge. Caleb did not look at me while she spoke. He looked at the table, then at Liam, then back at his own hands. I answered Helen, not him. My original warning was specific. My monitoring activity was passive, public-facing, and created after the report was dismissed. Caleb leaned back slightly. That is her interpretation. I turned to him then, not sharply, just directly. No, I said. It is the order of events. The room went quiet. Some people think control means speaking less. Sometimes it means using the fewest words necessary and leaving them where they can be examined. Helen looked between us. Mr. Mercer, she said to Caleb, your position is that Miss Hale did not identify the verification handshake in any actionable way. That is correct, he said. Liam's expression did not change, but I saw his jaw tighten once. Before anyone else could speak, the door opened. Sandra entered with Natalie from marketing behind her and another woman from legal operations carrying a laptop and a small evidence envelope. Sandra closed the door, set a USB drive on the table, and took the chair nearest Helen. Russell looked up. What is this? Sandra folded her glasses and placed them beside her notebook. This is the reason we delayed starting. No one moved. Then she nodded to the legal operations woman, who connected the laptop to the room screen. A video window opened. At first, it was only ordinary office sound. Chairs shifting. Someone clearing their throat. A few stray comments from what was clearly a recorded team stand-up. Then Troy's voice said, lightly, the marketing woman came by yesterday. Says there's a problem with the verification handshake. Claims customer data is moving unencrypted during auth. I did not look at Caleb. I kept my eyes on the screen. Another voice, someone farther from the recording device, asked, did anyone check it? Then Caleb answered, not worth the time. Put it in minor concerns and move on. The clip ended less than a minute later. No one spoke. Helen lowered her pen. Russell looked at Caleb for a long time without saying anything at all. The silence was more uncomfortable than anger would have been. Finally, Sandra opened a folder and slid printed screenshots onto the table. We also traced the threatening text messages sent to Miss Hale, she said. Not conclusively to Mr. Mercer, but to a prepaid device purchased by Mr. Troy Bennett the day before the breach was discovered. Building footage places him at the purchase location. That got a reaction. Caleb turned sharply. What? It was the first fully unguarded thing I had seen from him. Liam stared at the screenshots, then at Sandra. You're sure? As sure as this stage allows, she said. Enough to establish intimidation directed at a reporting employee during an active incident. Russell's face had gone flat in the way some executives manage when they are already making decisions and no longer need the room's help getting there. He turned to Caleb. You told this company there had been no specific warning. Caleb swallowed once. I made a judgment call based on the source. Natalie spoke before anyone else could. The source had 5 years of security experience. I hired her because of it. That was in her file. Caleb looked down. I noticed then that his cuff was frayed slightly at one edge. A small thing, the kind of detail you only see when someone has finally stopped performing confidence. Russell shifted his attention to me. Mara, he said, did you access any internal restricted system to obtain this recording? No, I said. That was all I gave him. Sandra spoke before a follow-up could begin. The recording was provided to legal through an internal preservation channel. The chain of custody is sufficient for employment review and incident governance. That was enough for the room, and everyone knew it. Caleb tried once more. This is being framed like negligence. It was triage. We get dozens of claims, half of them nonsense. Liam answered him this time. She was specific. You heard her. You dismissed it because of where she sat in the org chart. Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it. Helen finally wrote something down. Russell looked at Sandra. Next steps. She spoke in the same steady voice she had used all morning. Mr. Bennett should be placed on immediate leave pending termination review. Mr. Mercer should be removed from operational authority during the post-incident investigation. We preserve all remaining communications, complete the customer exposure count, and prepare for external reporting. Then Russell looked at me again. You will continue with Liam for now. Direct line to my office until this is resolved. I nodded once. Understood. No one apologized in that room. Not then. That was fine with me. An apology would not have changed the record. What mattered was that the record now existed in the right order. As the meeting broke, Caleb stood slowly. He looked older than he had the day before. Not ruined. Not pitiful. Just reduced to the size of the facts around him. He did not speak to me. Neither did I speak to him. I gathered my notebook, picked up my phone, and walked back toward my office through the quiet hall. Halfway there, the phone buzzed once. A new message from an unknown number. Not a threat this time, just 4 words. He didn't know everything. I stopped near the window, read it again, and put the phone face down in my hand. Then I waited. By noon, the company had stopped trying to treat the breach like a technical inconvenience. It had become what it actually was, a legal event, a customer event, a leadership event. The language changed first. No one said issue anymore. They said incident, then exposure, then notification timeline. Words become more honest when money gets attached to them. I spent most of that day in the incident room with Liam, Sandra, and 2 people from compliance. The whiteboard was full by lunchtime. Timelines, system dependencies, customer counts, state reporting thresholds. Someone replaced the untouched sandwiches with a tray of coffee and bottled water, but almost no one touched that either. The room smelled like paper, dry air, and overheated electronics. By early afternoon, the numbers settled enough to say out loud. 21,412 customer records had been exposed through the authentication gap before the patch fully took effect. Not all of those would become fraud cases. Not all of them would even be misused. But they had been exposed. And exposure is enough. Sandra began organizing the record the way good legal teams do when they know a matter will outlive the week. She separated events into categories: technical discovery, prior notice, response actions, preservation activity, employee conduct, and external obligations. Facts moved better once they were given proper shelves. I stayed mostly with the technical timeline. Liam stayed with containment and vendor coordination. Every hour or so someone else entered, took notes, asked a question, and left. At 2:40, Sandra asked me to walk through the Friday sequence one more time for the written report. I did. What I noticed during the demo recording. What I reviewed that evening from the public-facing side. What I wrote down Friday morning. What I said in the security pod. What was said back. No embellishment. No emotion added after the fact. Just sequence. When I finished, she looked over the rim of her glasses and asked, "Do you believe Mr. Mercer intended the breach?" "No," I said. She paused. "Do you believe he knowingly ignored a specific warning because of your department and role?" "Yes." She wrote that down. At 3:15, Helen from HR joined us with a short update. Troy had been escorted from the building after turning in his badge and laptop. He had declined to answer questions about the prepaid phone without counsel present. Caleb had been placed on administrative leave pending the formal conclusion of the investigation. Aaron had been asked to step in temporarily on day-to-day security coordination under Liam's supervision. That part felt right. Quietly right. Not dramatic. Just corrective. A little later, Russell came in and closed the door behind him. He looked tired in the way senior executives do when they have spent the entire day speaking carefully to lawyers, customers, and board members without saying what they actually think. He took the empty chair across from me. "I wanted to say this directly," he said. "You were treated dismissively, and the company paid for that mistake." I waited. He continued, "That includes leadership failure, not just security failure." It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get from someone in his position. It was enough because it was plain. He placed a thin folder on the table and turned it toward me. Inside was a draft proposal for a new role: security review and oversight lead. Independent reporting line. Cross-functional authority. Direct access to executive review during major incidents. Formal responsibility for validating risks raised from any department, not just technical teams. I read the title once, then the first page, then closed the folder. Russell did not try to sell it. We built this too narrowly, he said. You saw the gap, technically and culturally. That last word mattered more than the rest. Culturally, because that had been the real breach before the packet logs and customer notifications and overnight legal work. A system where the wrong person could be correct and still not be heard. I'll need to think about it, I said. You should, he replied. Then he stood and left the folder with me. That evening, just before 6, Sandra asked me to review one final item. The threatening messages. Telecom records had tightened the picture. The prepaid device had indeed been activated from inside the building. Security footage confirmed Troy buying the phones. Badge logs placed him on the same floor at the approximate send times. There was no evidence Caleb had directed the messages. What the evidence showed, more likely, was a loyal subordinate trying to protect his manager by frightening the person who could prove their record was false. Ugly, familiar, predictable, and very easy to explain once written down in order. I read through the summary, handed it back, and said he wanted me to leave before the timeline settled. Sandra nodded. That appears to be exactly right. By 7:10 p.m., most of the floor had emptied. The incident room was quieter now. The whiteboard was still crowded, but the shape of the crisis had changed. It was no longer chaos. It was administration. Patch completed. Exposure count established. Preservation in place. Employment actions initiated. External notice preparation underway. That is what resolution usually looks like in real life. Not a speech. Not a dramatic reversal. A stack of controlled steps that leave less and less room for denial. As I packed my things, Liam stopped beside the table. I should have listened faster, he said. It was a simple sentence. Unpolished. Probably true. I put the phone face down beside my bag for a moment and zipped the outer pocket closed. What matters now, I said, is what gets built after this. He nodded once. I know. I took the folder Russell had left, slipped it under my arm, and headed for the elevator. The office lights were dimmer than usual. Vacuum noise came from somewhere down the hall. In the lobby, the evening security guard gave me a small nod as the doors opened. When I stepped outside, the air was cool and clean after a day of recycled air and fluorescent light. For the first time in 2 days, no one was asking me to explain anything. I walked to my car, set the folder on the passenger seat, and sat there for a moment with both hands on the wheel. Then I drove home. At the first red light, my phone buzzed once more. This time it was not an unknown number. It was Aaron. When you're ready, I need to tell you something about another audit Caleb buried last winter. I read it once. Then I waited. That night, I did not open the folder right away. I carried it into my apartment, set my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, and stood for a moment in the quiet. My place was small and orderly in the way I liked. One lamp near the bookshelf. A narrow kitchen. A blue mug drying beside the sink. The window over the table reflected the room back at me because it was already dark outside. I changed into soft clothes, washed my face, and filled the kettle. The sound of water heating has always helped me settle. No urgency in it. Just a familiar sequence. Cup, tea bag, steam, spoon against ceramic. I moved slowly, not because I was tired, though I was, but because the day had finally ended and I wanted it to end all the way. I took the tea to the table and opened the folder Russell had given me. The role description was straightforward. Oversight across departments. Independent review authority. Direct reporting line during incident escalation. It was written in formal company language, but underneath that language was something plain. They had learned, at some cost, that risk does not care where a person sits on the org chart. I read it once. Then again. After that, I made a short list on a yellow pad. What I would require. Clear authority. Documented reporting rules. No private back channels. Formal review of concerns from any department. Training tied to behavior, not only technical skill. I did not decide that night. I only organized the decision. Then I washed my cup, wiped down the counter, and folded the yellow page into the folder. The next morning, the apartment felt lighter. I opened the window a few inches while I made coffee. A bus stopped at the corner below. Someone walked a dog across the lot behind the building. Ordinary sounds. Useful sounds. At 8:12, Erin called. Her voice was careful, but steadier than before. "There's something else you should know," she said. Caleb pushed aside another warning last winter. Different team. Different product. It never turned into a breach, so no one forced the record open. I leaned against the counter and looked out through the narrow gap in the window. "Do you have anything in writing?" I asked. "Audit notes. Maybe more. I didn't want to send it to work email yet." "That's fine," I said. "Don't send anything until legal tells you where it goes." There was a short pause. "I should have said something sooner," she said. "Yes," I answered. "But you're saying it now." After we hung up, I stood there a little longer with my coffee in my hand. That was the part people often misunderstand. Resolution is not the same as completion. One clean record does not mean the whole system was clean. Sometimes it only means the first locked drawer has been opened. By noon, I had sent Russell and Sandra my conditions for accepting the new role. By afternoon, Sandra replied that every condition would be formalized in writing before any transition. 3 weeks later, I moved into a different office on a quieter floor. Nothing dramatic about it. A desk, 2 chairs, a lockable cabinet. Better light in the afternoon. Erin joined the review function part-time while the broader team was reorganized. Liam and I worked well together after that, mostly because we had learned to keep things plain and on the record. The company paid for the breach. In money, reputation, legal work, and long meetings no one enjoyed. Caleb left without ceremony. Troy did not come back. Customer notices went out. Regulators received their reports. The numbers stayed real no matter how uncomfortable they were. And the work changed. New review rules. Cross-functional reporting. Logged escalation paths. No more informal dismissals of concerns based on title, department, or tone of voice. A few months later, on a quiet Friday afternoon, Erin brought me a binder from the archive room and set it on my desk. "Winter audit," she said. I looked at the label, then up at her. She gave a small nod. "You'll want to read page 14 first." After she left, I rested my hand on the binder for a moment before opening it. Then I waited. If you stayed with me through this story, I'd be glad to have you here again. Please like and subscribe, and in the comments tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. 2 popular stories will appear next, and I think you'll enjoy both of them.